I think, yeah, that in terms of spontaneity and like animal instinct, as you say, we do decently. But that spontaneity and animal instinct is not going to get us very far. Like, so the other thing I'll mention as a parting shot in this subject is that, like, yeah, the sort of the theory and organizational strategy around also like protest media, like recording and publicizing using traditional media, like Amnesty and Ford Foundation and these groups in countries where you show serious capacity, you start to develop serious capacity around those. You even get a lot more international alliances and trainings and stuff. So, you know, the Latin American people, they've really figured out how to use Ford Foundation. So the Ford Foundation has become like, you know, in a lot of cases, Ford Foundation radicalizes at the local level, not national, not globally, but Ford Foundation staff, you know, you have to hire from within the protests ecosystem. Same with Amnesty. So now Amnesty in Nigeria has improved a bit because of actually TIB, take it back, people have. So the Amnesty now is one of the more, like Amnesty tries to train, is now training about specific like mobilization skills and improve, you know, that kind of stuff. So you can see that, yeah, some of the early phases of that kind of thing is happening here. But I'm not talking about like, oh, you need to have a disciplined vanguard per se. You know, of course you need that, but like I'm saying, even in the absence of that, like what does a protest or social movement ecosystem look like? You know, if we're still at the level where people act surprised when there's repression, then it's like, okay, yeah, we have some ways to go in terms of social movement ecosystem. And part of what, final statement on this, now part of what the regime in Nigeria does very effectively is not actually repression, is the veneer of freedom of speech. So that's why, you know, Nigerians are so good at making jokes about their regime because that's where they direct their energy. I mean, so our real innovation is banter here. But I mean, yeah, but you can insult them as much as you want. They're still laughing to the bank. You know, I think when it comes to like innovating on the street in terms of social movement, that Nigeria is not really in that conversation. Kenya is in that conversation increasingly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You know, but yeah, of course we are champions at the abyss. But let's see where that takes us.
I think it's still the feeling of the theoretical aspect of things, you know, like that.
Jesus Christ. Who is going to?
Yeah, I've been listening for about like 5 to 10 minutes now. Either. So I think it's just a feeling. Yeah. I think it's still a feeling. It still goes back to that theory and practical action feeding back each other. If the theoretical basis is not, you know, solid enough, then people just spontaneously or just jump into these things, not knowing the full ramifications of what will come, you know, when you're dealing with the state. And then we just act surprised when they pull the guns out and start killing people. That's the nature of the state. It's a murderous entity, especially when it is antagonistic to, you know, the fundamental demands of the people, or when the people start demanding for, you know, like structural changes that threaten the lifeblood of the oppressors, you know. So how do we then make that kind of knowledge like common ground or common place for everybody that wants to get into the...
Oji, here, I'll even be slightly more polemical, so let me attack the left. So I think that it's not high theory we're missing. As the nature of the state, the nature of proletariat, you know, the ruling class, that kind of level of theory. I think it's kind of medium range theory we're missing, as in how to dress up for the protest. Like what's
just basic.
Yes. As in, so in a way, you could even argue that the missing political education is not theory, it's more like skills. Do you know what I mean? And it's not strategy, it's more like tactics. Do you know what I mean?
I get what you're saying, really, because look at that NSAS now. It sort of morphed into like almost a fashion show, a cookout barbecue on the street type of thing. Like, and it's the element of that, you know, what comes with the whole protest thing. Is it a place where you know that when you know that your life is at risk, what you're doing can kill you? And I think the general sentiment of being there would get past, let's just entertain ourselves. We can entertain ourselves, but we're not going to lose sight of the possibility of being dead with bullets flying. So it gives a level of seriousness to what we are doing, like looking out for each other, expecting arms and like people should start shooting at you, expecting that there might be saboteurs, like agent provocateurs in between. Like these are the things that come with that broad knowledge, and you have to be vigilant because this is a social movement that has sort of tipped into critical mass, and then the ruling class they are panicking, shutting things down, hiding. You're starting to touch the main nerves of things. And you have to know that it is this time and juncture that they bear their fangs.
No. So, but OAG, I kind of disagree with you, because if we go back, and I'm saying this is my last contribution, because I won't make we wrap up early as well. If we had a history of protest, if we had strategies for staying on the ground, and I'll argue that part of what our analysis was early in those days, that it was, easy for them to disperse those protesters because they were middle class, even upper middle class protesters. And that if they were from, the hoods, they would have been a whole different ball game. Maybe that analysis still stands, but I think that overall, we don't have strategies for protests. Because if we did, there would be no way in the world where people will come up, and a lot of young Nigerians will lap it up that if you draped yourself around the Nigerian flag, that they won't shoot you. You would know that they will shoot you.
This is the point I'm making. That's part of the point that I'm making. Okay. That the general knowledge feeds then into your strategy. Yeah. If you don't know anything, you won't develop strategy. Even if you say, okay, you want trade for, that's just a funny example to use, but you want trade for stock markets. You guys know at least what the stock market day about that basic knowledge of the fundamentals. Then, okay, what's now my strategy? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? When am I buying? When am I? But okay, now protest.
It comes with repetition that
you have to start somewhere.
Yes.
And I think that it's true that learning from practice is going to probably take us further than trying to develop tactics from like pure theory. Because what tends to happen if you start from pure theory is that you end up having a discussion group. So, right? Like you end up having, best case scenario, you end up having a faculty or like a center for the study of X. And then even better than that, you guys can publish or produce books. You know what I mean? Like you produce, you actually, I mean like you advance knowledge, theoretical knowledge, which by the way, most of our studies groups or whatever, like none of them publish. So it's kind of like, it's not, it's more like a reading group where you read other people's work. So you're not even really developing new knowledge per se. But so that's, I think, the best case scenario when you're like, let's start out from high theory. What is the nature of reality? Some people, okay, let's start from what is the nature of history, etc. Like, are you going to get at what point are you going to get from there to what street should we block in the next protest? It's going to take you 1,000 years. But if you start from like, in that last protest, what street did they drive down before they came and shot us? Okay. And what should we, because like now, if we burn a police car and block that street, now what's their second option? You know what I mean? Then we're going in some direction, I think, towards like what it would require to actually exercise leverage. Yeah. I don't really know where our points of leverage are. Like, I'm going to say one more thing, and like the 20th century theory that most left people read talks about the points of leverage in the 20th century when the capitalist class was industrial. So they constantly needed more employees. So, okay, point of leverage is then that if you withdraw labor, not only are you shutting down the factory today, you're also like, because they had to expand the industry. Now they're contracting industry, they're shedding labor, they're trying to move their finances to the stock market. So if we think the point of leverage is still the same, good luck with that, basically. So the point of leverage has shifted. And that's at the very general global level. If you come to Nigeria now, so these things get more specific, but I think it's harder to arrive at these kinds of questions if we need to start from the sky, especially when the situation is this urgent and the baseline is this low. That'd be my
Yeah. I still
Anyway, plenty things do with it where we still give it. Even the structure of the Nigerian economy doesn't even help for large number of people turning out for protests, to be honest, because where everybody in our vendor, everybody
informal workers, everybody has
if you want to tell that person, there's hardly anywhere where you find that. I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is, so when they say, first of all, let's understand what we mean by that Nigeria is more of underemployed than unemployed. Okay, so but that underemployment, we say everybody in a one-man business, So and that one-man business increasingly now, if you run out from house, so the people that you meet, when you socialize, maybe when you go for a bar, when you go to the bar, everybody is busy coding what they do for a living from each other. Because the typical response from Nigerian, when you ask them what you do or how is business, is saying, God, we look good. So there's really there's nowhere where there's an exchange. There's hardly that. It's not that there's nowhere, but there's hardly spaces where you have this exchange of ideas where people begin to see, oh, okay, we're going through the same thing. And if we begin to pull, resources together, we can begin to ask for a couple of things, especially within, if we're, so that's that sense. So I think it's that disconnect, because if we look at it, you probably had more of the heady 70s and 80s in terms of protest cultures in Nigeria than you're having now, because increasingly, since SAP, this has been the legacy of the Nigerian state or the Nigerian economy, is that it has been increasingly that it's informalized, which then takes that power of, well, like I said, I don't, except this is what we're discussing today. But it just helps me see that there are holes in some of the analysis that will, that even in terms of how people responded to, because it was the 10-day thing. So what Said says about, how to barricade streets, I'm sure we had the conversation about, maybe the economic importance of Lekki toll gates in terms of that barricade, in terms of what it took away from Lagos purse. But was it, now having this kind of conversation, now you now begin to think, was it actually what was best? Because didn't people need to set up in such a way that safety became more paramount than just me? So these are the kinds of conversations that I think that if we're really serious, well, it's not even a question about being serious. If we're really into protests, in terms of if we get into the culture of, strong protests or massive protests or mass protests, these are things that people will easily figure out by themselves, like real quick.
Just to maybe buttress the points, like again, I'm leaning more, when I say theory, I'm not saying that we should bury our heads in book and this, because we need some basic understanding, just basic understanding that you'll be killed when you're on the streets. First, that knowledge, I think, has done 50% of what I need. That these people are not going to just sit back when you're starting to touch the state or touch people or touch the ruling class where it hurts them. You will be killed. That one, we don't need too much book about that one. Make they go find book up and down, And then we can go from having guidance. That guidance is very important too. Like, okay, this is the nature. You have the police, you have the army, you have this. There's a sort of knowledge, an edge that having knowledge and having strategy really gives. That knowledge then helps to refine your strategy. For example, when Cabral was going through his stuff in Guinea-Bissau, you read about Vietnam and some other place where they bomb bridge and they bomb some infrastructure. But we are poor in Guinea. We don't have bridges to bomb or sabotage all these rail lines and all that. Then we have to look for other strategies. We have to tailor fit. That's what we have to tailor fit the revolution or the action like a clothes that will fit our own conditions, So if you don't kind of have that sort of knowledge to fine-tune things, that economic knowledge, the knowledge of the environment, the knowledge of the terrain, where they handle things, then with that overall understanding that the state is violent, then I think there might be some mistakes some low-hanging mistakes that we can just quickly avoid. Yeah, this is just where I'm saying that knowledge helps to shape our strategy. Okay, that's what I kind of just feel.
No, I buy that. And I think a lot of the missing knowledge is empirical, as in it hasn't really been written up yet. In fact, it maybe even needs to be researched. It's almost like we need sort of collective and participatory research to identify. And so, for instance, there's one guy I met in Abuja at one point, he's left now, who was trying to map the trajectory of, in fact, the guy was French. So this partly comes from his experience in France and of how he's a French communist, okay? And it comes from his experience of protest in France and like some of the basic awareness that French protesters have, which we don't. He's like, what streets do protests usually happen on? And what junction does repression usually come from? Or like, what junction does repression usually, at what junction are they usually repressed? So, like, that's a kind of knowledge that that you kind of have to investigate, to find. And the second point is like, it's kind of like we, the theorists or intellectuals of this kind of struggle, I think also have to try to meet people where they are. And where they are is maybe sometimes a little better than where we assume. So I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that people know that they will be killed if they really threaten the regime. And it's part of why they're quiescent. Because they're like, didn't you see what happened during NSARS? But what they don't know is what to do. Like, they don't know the next move or how to preempt or prevent, so it's kind of like what they lack is not an awareness of the likely events. It's what they lack is like an awareness of what to do about it, how to respond, how to counteract, how to mitigate,
Well, who came up with that? If you have Nigerian flag wrapped around you, they won't shoot you. Who came up with where did we get that?
Not propaganda, man.
Probably Buhari.
I just want to know where that came from.
Somebody just believes for him. Because they cannot lie to you. Now, looking at the Lagos State Government House, for instance, as a site of protest, because now my mind is fresh. I don't say, not be say fresh. My mind don't go back to when some musicians, have you seen our musicians? That guy where they do entertainers, go sit down from there. That's how the protest actually started.
Macaroni.
Lagos, macaroni them, they go sit down for there. It was kind of peaceful. But the one that I witnessed was the one where these guys wanted to, even me, I don't get the language for protest because I don't say you get one word where they look for. Do you understand? Then be one, at least I know their plan, I said they won't touch secretariat. Maybe they won't even touch governor office. Do you understand? They won't light them up. You understand? But there was just a couple of people coming out from inside CMD. And these guys walk past, they walk up past, the protesters, they pass head of SSS head office, so I be their office, then they pass the SSS people. Then they go towards secretariat. But you don't get the numbers. And it seems to me that even logically, if you won't break into the say secretariat, or you won't touch secretariat, or you won't touch, for instance, governor's office, una go need plenty. and una go need hit that governor's office from different parts of there's different access points. So some people go come from Alausa, some people go they come from Magodo, some people go they come from Ogba, some people go they come from Oregun. You understand? So that way, before the police begin spread barricades or position barricade, they go no be just one barricade then they put. That means they go get different, or like 4 or 5 different barricades. Then
Right.
that means the resources that they need to do
You've now
that is
stretched them
increased.
out.
Yeah, you're now stretching them. You're now stretching them. You know, but say you just won't come from Magodo. They just get not only you be their point of resistance, and then go through everything with them, and then, where they get at that. So I think that if we have done protests where 100,000 people lay siege on the Lagos State government house, if it has ever happened before, and it happens another 3 or 4 or 5 times, no person could tell Nigerian president say the police force of maybe 200,000 no be waiting Lagos need. For instance, the police, the police, the people of.
So this is part of why like some mass social welfare programs will tend to happen after wars, right? Like of course, the welfare state in Europe was in the post-war period. You think of the GI program in the US, which is after the Vietnam period. It's because they're like, these people returning from the war front have skills. If they come back and contribute those skills to mass mobilization.
To contrast, like the game.
Yes, this is going to tip the balance of forces domestically. So let us help. Let's make life easier for them when they come back to the extent possible with some of these programs. I think that's got to be part of the history of social democracy and the welfare state and all of that. Keep in mind that people like Lenin and Trotsky, these people fought in war. They fought in civil war also. A lot of those people, the Bolsheviks, were also former combatants. And keep in mind also that decolonization was fueled partially by people who returned from fighting World War II.
Yeah, that's what was going through my head, actually.
Well, they had some kind of tactical and geographic, and then the ones that didn't have learned it very quickly, like Cabral. Incountably. I'm not saying that we should become guerrillas, obviously, but I guess that like some of the skills that you have to grapple with in thinking about the practicalities of revolution, rather than declaring revolution on social media or whatever, but thinking about like what it would practically look like. I miss. Yeah.
I even like the folks that are declaring, like, this is back to Take It Back movement, Omoyele and all that. Shit, then go talk, say they never acquire some sort of tactical, strategic like skills over the couple of decades where they do these things. Like, I'm sure he must have been in some sort of real trouble with the Nigerian state to know how they react and all that. I'm feeling that should kind of translate into success practically, because if you've known these people and you have had like one-on-one interaction with them, with your people mobilizing as student leaders and all that, and this was even when the thing was more potent, that those times, I think maybe this is my own point now, that over-leaning too much on social media has sort of drawn back the movement, and that trying to mobilize people via social media is all right, but we should not forget that the work, understanding, updating the skills, updating what we need to do should also come in place to buttress the experience that might be not so valid like that anymore in this new age and time, because social media has some sort of ability or a tendency to make you just do something, like type something and feel like you've done something, and I feel like he's he might be over-relying on the power of the media, especially for a place like Nigeria, where people want to touch and feel things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think they have developed some expertise, but it's in it's in the court system and the prison system. Like they know what to say to the chief of police in a given place to make them feel some kind of pressure to release
I
arrested.
agree. I agree with you.
You know what I mean? And they kind of
Mm.
they know how to, like to persistently play this or that games in the court so that the judge stops coming and the case is thrown out. You know what I mean? But they have a decent network of lawyers. They know how to like mobilize the gallery so that the judge feels uncomfortable. So that's kind of expertise. You can call it criminal justice has developed, even though they've not necessarily then turned that into a mass knowledge base, as in, like systematically educating the people who should be educated, such about that to redistribute that knowledge more widely. But when it comes to, yeah, and then I agree with you even more with your second point that like the social media seems like a shortcut. It's not, it's a detour, it's like, because it's not clear that the highest probability the people who are more likely to take action are on social media. That's not clear, nor is it clear that the most strategic people to reach out to are going to announce themselves on social media. So it might get you the people who will retweet or make the noise. Like it might get you echoing in the media. And maybe by luck, some of that echo might filter into the highest probability areas. So, give you an example of end bad governance. The hottest end bad governance was Kano, right?
That's the only one that has in recent times, led to was it not that one that led to our friend, the Labour House being
Yeah, them crushing the socialist
yeah,
bookstore.
so I mean, and they knew what they were doing. They knew that it was a socialist. So you could see the effort that they put into spinning, that
Yeah,
protest as subterfuge, as a foreigner who was trying
foreign
to
influence.
foreign influence. I mean, so you could see the kind of work that went, as in, even if the rest of Nigeria didn't know, we knew. So you see, but I don't think that as a result of repetition or repetitive protest. Um, I mean, in very recent memory, this first time I'm seeing, the states do that as in real time. It would seem to me that that's part of how the state handled people like Edwin Mardinal, that generation of radicals,
True.
especially after the 1979 riots or protests. So, I think that if between when that NBAD governors protest that Said has talked about on that scale, if it had happened like 3 or 4 times after, that would have been in the 3 years that Bola Tinubu has been there so far. It go dey hard for the police to spin saying a foreign influence, or so there will be a response to that, or that or that. In fact, the second one would be much, much. So if you notice, every other one that they tried to do after that, which was kind of, if you ask me, for lack of a better word, if that we're trying to engineer, didn't quite match that first one. Imagine if the second one or the third one was much more than that. Then you could now see the vulnerabilities of it's just be like all these attacks where they happen, for forest areas, like the one where happened for Ibadan or your state recently. The question of say bandits they get sophisticated every time because
And absolutely. I mean, while we condemn in the strongest possible terms what happened and stuff, but it's clear that yeah, these people are thinking about the vulnerabilities. Like that's what they're trying to say when they attack a school and they stay there for hours. They're trying to say like, we know you guys intimately. Like we know where you're weak. Like they'll go to a prison, like what the Kuje attack in the Kuje prison. They stayed there for hours, man. They were like, we know how long it's going to take your patrol vehicle to arrive. So we'll stay here till you're close by and then we'll leave. You know
They
what I
know.
mean? Yeah, of
Because
course.
you're right. I mean, because so let me come back to something I said earlier. And then it's looking like this is a conversation for today because we don't do like 30 minutes. So I think we can do it. There's a way to move into what's happened recently with security. So the security aspects of Nigeria. So when people who say, there are people who and these people are usually I don't want to say Bola Tinubu fans but these people are usually APC people. When they say that Tinubu or Fashola improve security in Lagos, they're usually always talking about the robberies that used to happen in Lagos, that hasn't happened in a while, right?
Yeah, armed robberies, carjackings.
Yeah, to make their point, they would go and refer to laws that enabled the formation of one trust fund or the rapid response unit as a special unit under the police force.
Operation Sweep.
Operation Sweep was
military P.
Yeah, that was Marwa. And basically, I would even argue that what Operation Sweep, what RRS, Rapid Response Squad, or Rapid Response Squad actually was, they just changed the name of Operation Sweep, and then since then been create trust fund. They come map out some of that money into equipping these guys, and that their mandate was usually let us respond rapidly to cases of armed robbery, really, and waiting be the marker of armed robbery now when robbers don't begin, say, so they get maybe their network with banks. So what you found was that as a result of that, you then had an increase in face-off between armed robbers and this rapid response unit. But what people don't quite pay attention to is that Nigeria was changing. There was a decline in the use of cash. Banks were, I think it was under Soludo that there was this recapitalization thing. Then we moved to digital banking, because increasingly we had the middle class that wanted to also enjoy some of the niceties or the luxuries that middle class anywhere else in the world were getting. So we needed to now do more card transactions. So people don't look at the macroeconomic, policies that gave rise or that, for us to see that kind of decline in armed robbery. But I think more importantly, there was also the urban nature of how Lagos was beginning to expand, where you started having less expand. So Lagos was increasingly being built up, because what I know is that once you leave Lagos and you go to other parts of the country, say Enugu, for instance, and some other parts of the country, maybe, not all parts of the country, as far as you get land expanse of bush with the unmanned, the chances are that you will still find armed robbers who are willing to go and, risk their lives to rob bullion vans, because there are places where they can escape and easily, because also there's no traffic. So Lagos, I think armed robbery became bad business in Lagos, and then for a while they then pivoted to kidnapping, where people like Evans then came. So I think, even crime began to change. The nature of crime began to change as a result of how, what macroeconomic policies were being put in. So people don't quite pay attention to that. So because
I mean, if I could jump in here to tie the two conversations together somewhat, or pose a question or present a framing that ties it together, it's almost like you're saying that the criminal economy reveals some of the vulnerabilities of the Nigerian state, so if we can classify crime, I know this is maybe unfair in all instances, but if you can classify the client crime and some of the terrorism as far right, I mean, terrorism is definitely far right, then you can see that like far right radicalism is better at revealing the vulnerabilities of the state than the left certainly is. And the awareness being shown by the far right about the vulnerabilities of the state and the regime is something that we need to take seriously. I mean, very often we take the side of the regime inadvertently. What we're really trying to do is take the side of the people, which is fair. Take the side of the teachers and the students, which of course is correct. But inadvertently, we also take the side of the regime. Oh, why don't you beef up security in forests, etc. But I mean, there's another question we could be answering or asking that we're not answering, which is what should we be doing about forests?
Apparently. No, because I mean, you see, so for me, I'll be slow to critique the idea of forest guard, which I see people doing already, and I kind of understand where they're coming from. So,
yeah,
a critique of forest guard as a response to kidnapping, kidnapping, or as a response to banditry, it's going to be a hard sell because emotions are actually charged. Do you understand? And if that's how you're framing why you're bringing in forest guards, if that's your rationale for bringing forest guard, the way the architecture that will give birth to that forest guard unit will be radically different from if you frame it as preventive. Do you understand? Let's even guard our forests and even stop these guys from actually abducting and kidnapping school children. That approach will be totally different and it will be far more expensive. So you see, all this band aid we will put on top, when we hear say, like Chibok girl, now band aid, because part of the demands that we're not making is because we're not making those kinds of demands that they carry security vote money, they buy bulletproof car for governor, money where they're supposed to go into channeling into how they could set up surveillance for this these forests, and I don't know how to put them, but you go find out what states they get for what governors they get for security votes. Basically, if the demands are framed right, or if people are asking the right questions and pushing for getting the right solutions, no governor will see fading to teeth because you know even do in the first place.
Yeah, totally.
I just feel like the complete absence of the state government officials in all these places will be rural communities and all, it's coming back to bite them. Oh, okay, not even them. It's coming back to kill citizens now. Was them. It's coming back to kill citizens because if governments get presence, and I'm not saying all this spread out, federal government they do something, but there's no productive use of the rural communities. There's no productive interrelationship between the local economies in these places and even the government. There's really no link like that. Aside, okay, maybe they are stealing, they are mining, illegal mining somewhere, and where they also even lead to conflict and all that. But if you get land, forestry department, all these kind of things, link them to employment and all those places, no could will be festering ground for people to just come, they plan crime and all that. For the economic activities, they go on, where they keep an eye on all these kind of things. Imagine we'll get forestry, regeneration, things industries built around those things. People are employed around those things. Yeah, and then person won't do crime. Anybody that wants to carry out something bad will not feel like there are places where, maybe they know they do anything for you, make I just go hide for them. But if you say things, people they move in and out, things they happen, this place is being preserved, it's conserved, there's economic activity. Back to what you said about Lagos and how the macroeconomics changed the nature of crime. Okay, places they built up, it's a big city. We went from armed robbery to cash don't change. I feel like it's some sort of economic activity or the base of the economics of all this place places where, like say, government they absent. If it changes, then it might, as the flip side of things, change also the nature of crime. It might now be that people will now start stealing money from the economic activities going on, like maybe fraud or doing other things. But it won't be, say, they would cut person head or they would, yeah.
Sorry to interject, but you see why there are a lot of reasons why. So even for people who study crime, they've noticed. I don't know if it's a conversation. Somebody who's telling me this, but I don't think I read about it. The dynamics of crime has changed. So crime has increasingly even moved from the cities into the rural area, and the reason why is because increasingly the rural areas are unmanned. Okay, and that you have, in terms of landmass, you have more, you have a bigger percentage of rural areas than the urban areas. But let's even go back to banditry, for instance, and the issues that we're beginning to find around national parks or in forests, okay? Forests and I think
parks.
You guys get what I mean.
Yeah, parks and national.
Yeah. The technology that you require, first of all, the things that you require to guard that place, to man that place in a way that deters people from even thinking about it is, first of all, you need electricity. So that electricity is absent in most of rural Nigeria already is a problem. You get. So when you talk about the digital economy, we talk about the digital economy because we're talking about cities. There are communities, there are villages where you have to travel like maybe 20, 30 kilometers to use an ATM. Okay. So, these things are now increasingly being bypassed by POSs. Do you understand? But in rural communities, part of why crime is on the increase is that there are a lot of people who still hold on to cash. Do you understand? Whether they use POS or not, POS now just, I give you cash, I give you cash, you put them into my account, or I need cash, I can't take them from you. But there's a lot of cash that's, and then you have now knowledge network now. If person can't collect 300K from POS today, if the POS person, if you slip from the person mouth, you go tell somebody, say, this guy, we always look at him like small guy, but now this guy, they can't collect 300K. These are not the conversations that they go on among everyday Nigerians. Do you understand? So by the time whether they come, where bandits they come, they no say, Nami and you, they look rural Nigeria as rural Nigeria before. Rural Nigeria now don't the whole small bar. You understand? Depending on the communities. So they know say if they come, they will come fit, obtain some kind of money, they can, even without big incidents, they can kidnap somebody who is a millionaire in one small community and then go ask for 5 million ransom. These things, they happen steady. And they know the road where the person they apply. So I think that for us the kind of money that we need to put into the kind of security architecture that a 21st century Nigeria needs is the government, even when they map it out as security votes, they're not going to use it. So these are the incidents, if we're really asking the right questions, because like me, when you say state police, what's the state police going to do different if they're not going to be funded to actually do the work of policing in the 21st century Nigeria in both urban and rural Nigeria? Do you understand? It makes no sense. Yeah, I mean, Said, you can jump in. It makes no sense to me whether it's state police or whether it's federal.
Look, here's the other big paradox that I think is a problem for the left, right? And I guess, to me, this again is an attempt to link the earlier conversation about vulnerabilities in the regime and mapping and understanding vulnerabilities in the regime to the conversation about security. The paradox is that the very things that make the state vulnerable are the same things that lead to like insecurity for the population, right? Like the areas where there's highest crime will likely also be the areas where there's a lot more potential for challenging the regime. You see what I'm saying? Like the urban peripheries where where populations are more restive because of different kinds of deprivations. And the under policed rural areas, like, those are again the areas where the underbelly of the regime is exposed. It's also, of course, incidentally, the areas where the left is most absent in Nigeria. So, what we're often demanding for as left is that the state fill those vacuums, which is good and bad, right? Because of course, yeah, in theory, if the state fills those vacuums, then people will get better security. In theory, that's not always true. But the outcome will also be that the regime becomes harder to challenge from those positions. So I'll give you an example. Like, you can think of the policing in Brazil. My limited understanding is that the urban peripheries are militarized. Basically, it's not just like the police that go to the favelas in Rio are like armed with assault rifles, basically almost tanks. It's kind of the way that apartheid police were policing Soweto. So you can think of that kind of policing. So they can suppress a lot of dissent in the urban periphery, both crime and dissent. But the policing is weaker in the rural areas. So that's why you could get like insurgencies in parts of Latin America and the countryside, sometimes left-wing insurgencies. But you could also get like movements like the MST, the Landless Workers Movement, that are occupying rural lands and farming them in order to like produce food and then to feed the urban poor and to generate some revenue for social movement. So I guess the story I'm telling there or trying to tell is that, like, what I'm trying to point to is this kind of paradox between ungoverned spaces, quote unquote, and the growth of the left in particular localities. Now, of course, the thing is that because a lot of our left here lives not even really in the urban peripheries, but in peri-urban or urban settings. I mean, it means that the demand is for the state to govern those urban peripheries on our behalf. You know what I mean? There's no real aspiration for dual power here. There's no real aspiration to like govern, basically, to create the liberated zones of Cabral, on behalf of the people. The aspiration is like for the state to do that on our behalf, for the regime to do that. It's kind of like asking the colonial state to create the liberation zones for you, so to speak, or to like govern the liberation zones for you. So yeah, but of course that's so far from our contemporary discourse that it might seem like insane, But it's like it just is a register that we don't really tap into. I guess the closest we come to that is when people call for community policing, But people say, oh, community should police. I mean, the thing is that as it stands currently, that is happening. Like there's, of course, extensive vigilante networks across the country. There have been for at least 2 decades. There's
Road
forest.
safety cop,
Exactly. I mean, then there's the hunters guilds and all of that. But we're absent really from those structures, and those structures are generally more dominated by traditional authority, who use it for various things, some of which are semi-criminal as well.
But I don't know if how policing has evolved even in the urban centers. To some extent, the urban periphery has anything to do much with how the left has shaped the discourse, to be honest. I think that is even it's pretty much followed how neoliberals have cried and continue to cry for their own safety and within the urban centers. So that what increasingly, at least since 2014, I think Chibok girls in 2014. No, was it 2012?
Yeah, 14, I think.
14. So what we have gotten increasingly after that Jonathan era, let me just leave it like that, is that at no time ever after that period has Nigeria really even had, because what you had was like emotional outburst, emotional outrage, the sort that crystallized into the bring back our girls movement, and then increasingly we even haven't had that going forward. So that it feels that there's been a numbing of the senses to the degree that we've come to accept these things as everyday occurrences, just almost the same way we began to accept robbery as part of our lot, until social dynamics, economic dynamics began to change some of these things. And then a few states started to pay lip service to creating state laws for whatever it was. I mean, those who claim that even state governors have copied the APC, the Lagos model for security and all that, but because increasingly these guys don't really live in the rural areas. Okay, so let me, before I even go there. So I think so if you take Lagos for instance, to make my point a bit more clearer, part of the response by citizens to armed robbery in Lagos was to build gated communities, all right? So that if gated communities in 1999 was the exclusive preserve of the rich, right? Or in 2004, 2005, even up to 2007, for instance, by 2010, it became like the norm. So, just to get into any neighborhood, you go past like 2, 4, 3 gates, where they demand from about 6, 7 in the evening, and unmanned, before that. Okay. What you then began to have increasingly after 2010 is that also some gated communities now wanted to, show levels. So you can't get people where they give cards, then they pay estate dues. You go reach the gate, you guys, you will confine person go gas call. So now people then started to see this, and instead of analyze this as a failure of security, in anywhere in the world, it became something that people began to aspire to. So if you go cities outside of Lagos, you won't find you won't find these communities as much as in Lagos, but then they then exist. So that in those kinds of neighborhoods,
the phenomenon is everywhere now. Let me not even lie you. Like if I look at Ibadan now, even Abuja.
So I don't disagree, but they go fast. So if you call Port Harcourt, all of them go enter. But when you begin come my Calabar, for instance, do you understand? I'm not saying it's not everywhere, but when you hear those conversations, do you understand? You go to hear them as waiting they happen for Lagos. Now these things they happen for Lagos. Do you understand? So what these people what has now started to happen is that these guys it's now become a phenomenon, like you're saying, even though limited in some relative to other cities limited, but it don't do so aspirational way be say the price of land in some of these places are outrageous. So so the racket don't even go, because let me tell you what every state governor in Enugu has done since 1999. They come in and they grab land, however they choose to grab land. And when they grab land, it is usually that they are building estates. Do you understand? And then those lands begin to sell for like 50, 60, 70, 80 million. And that's like it's become so rampant that nobody really, draws a beeline between how these things came into existence and the failure of the state to secure at least upper middle class Nigerians. So that model is not a conversation we're having, because we're not having that conversation. We can't then see that in the rural areas, the kind of policing that is required for people who are lower middle class and the lower class it cannot be the model that that Lagos has evolved. So I don't know if I've made any sense so far, but I think what I'm trying to say is that we're not even having the conversation. Even the liberals, even the neoliberals are not even having, because they don't see any need. It's not just the left. They don't even see any need to have that conversation about rural policing.
No. But look, this is not a paradox for the liberals or the neoliberals. I mean, it's not. They are being more consistent in that sense, because what's their own business? What's their business with rural policing?
With you being safe.
Yeah, exactly. What's their business with that? It's not. They're being consistent now.
Because they know every village.
They will go to village. They'll go to village at Christmas. Some of them, and then
they go with escorts.
They will go with escort. Increasingly, they will go with escort. And look, the private security market is also developing. Like before, it was just halogen and which other one. But nowadays, right? Before it was just one or two mantra, halogen. But nowadays, and those ones for servicing VIPs. But nowadays, like bad as a bad self, there's even civil defense. If you gather civil defense people, how many of them, how much would you need to pay? You know what I mean?
And those ones, they get license to carry firearms.
And they can carry firearms across state lines even. Because like if you now want to hire, say you want to hire a sergeant for the day, they will tell you that, oh, they have to go and sign out a weapon. So you can't do that. That's a long story. You will say, write letter to my CEO. But you just call civil defense. And there are all these other groups now. The people who you can get 10 bouncers for a wedding. You can fool those guys in hillocks now and follow you to wherever you're going. You know what I mean? So the point is that we should expect nothing less from the neoliberals because they don't really. I mean, their version of provisioning from their perspective is like whoever has it kind of. If you can afford it, then you. If you can't afford it, then it doesn't belong to you. Basically, I mean, it's the last vestiges of that old mentality that you still get one of the few people saying, I mean, when it's inconvenient, like there's an image on their phone screen that they don't like, then they can protest for a couple of weeks. But fundamentally, the way that the thing is shifting is not something that they might complain about it, especially because they don't like the new estate dues or whatever. But it's not like a fundamental existential issue for them. But now, where the paradox arises is when it's the left, again, of various classes, that has to confront this issue. Because you're now like, and here I really want to hear OG's take, right? You're not like caught between making a demand that the same regime that you really should be working to undermine should deepen its surveillance capacity, should deepen its capacity for repression, should designate certain people as terrorists, all of which are things that, in a way, reduce the space for you to even operate. So, what do you think about that? What do you think about that, OAG? That question, especially for revolutionaries, like.
Oh,
Don't you see
God.
that as? Did you see a
Yeah,
certain kind of
it's a
paradox?
contradiction. It's a contradiction in itself because that means these guys that are oppressive with power then can breathe down your neck at every turn, which will then make whatever organization what you are doing, especially if it starts to morph into something that would threaten their stance or their position in society. But right about now, people are dying, and security of lives, protection of lives, making sure people don't die, beheadings everywhere. I think that should be something that should be stopped. But then again, we live in a society that really doesn't, one, care about people because they are further in the process of capital accumulation. Two, there is no feedback between people and the government. Like it's usually just one way. The government will just do whatever it is they want to do. So if you have a government that is not democratic in nature and that doesn't even want to go into the communities, listen to what people need, try to fashion out ways of protecting them or giving them what they need, like economically or just making their lives better, then what you're going to keep getting is just abandonment, and then the crimes are fester from total absence of the state, like the thing that Mika mentioned about electricity, pipe bomb water, all these normal things we're supposed to the communities where we say no conde. So it's that contradiction that sits where we have to look, okay, people are dying as a point, as actions that need to be taken quickly and urgently. Let's stop people from dying first, but I don't feel, and I know that the Nigerian state really doesn't care about people dying like that because people don't die so much.
And I also then have fundamental concerns or questions about Nigerian state's actual capacity. And here's where, like, maybe my take is starting to dovetail with America's take, which is that is it even within their
It's
knowledge,
not. It's
experience,
not.
and capacity to secure those forests?
It's not.
As in, even if there's state policing, as America says, even if you bring it to, okay, let governors do it, do they even know where to start with those things? Do they know anybody who knows, is there anybody they know that they can appoint who will do that job? I'm not even sure of that. So then it's kind of like, asking the pastor to do brain surgery or something like, asking the shoemaker to fix your car engine. It's like, so, and then it's also then like, in a sense, those capacities are in a way, you can see that there are capacities that we ourselves, as a society and as a left, are supposed to be developing, rather than outsourcing them to, because the state, as in the bourgeoisie, basically, and it's them that were really supposed to be outsourcing this stuff to. And so then, okay, I guess the final question I have in mind, right, to make it more concrete, is like, where do you folks stand on community security, vigilantism, and this sort of self-help thing that has arisen? And there's so many examples of this, and they exist on a spectrum between basically ethnic militias, all the way to semi-official vigilante group of Nigeria, police constabulary forces. I know in the southeast, like, some people carry this constabulary card that's given to them by the police force, etc. And everything in between, including the estate guards, that provide some private security, kind of carry arms, but they wear some uniform, etc. Like, what do you guys think of that as a solution? Is there more energy or attention we should be putting towards trying to make those things more effective? Or do you see it more as a combination or something entirely different that we're not considering?
I mean, some of the ones that I have observed closely, show, give off this tendency that they can become bandits, or the bandits of tomorrow.
The funny thing is, actually, a lot of the bandit groups also started out as
because that's how it is now. Because I mean, so let me give you like an example. You have guys who are community policing. Then here say they're robbed, or there's a report of somebody who is a shady character, and all of that. So what happens usually is that the village head and the what they call those things. Forgot what they call those things. Like the village,
chiefs.
No, the town union. So the town union and the village head kind of mobilize and maybe buy 2 double barrels, and 1 Dane gun for their community police. So the guy who is in charge has 1, then the 2 who are on patrol have 1, and then they spread. So all they need to do, what they basically do is all that. Now, once they're provided with this thing, there's no budget, so it's not like anybody's on a salary or something. It's community work. There's no law that even backs this shit up. So what these guys do is, how can you ask a man to start, policing the community or guarding the community from maybe 8 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 a.m. in the morning, and then you're not providing any funds for him. He doesn't have any. So he has a regular 9 to 5 that he does, but that he will come and assume 1 post by 8 o'clock. So what usually happens is that once there is even family dispute, so they now begin to even wade into civic matters, and they wade into this matters as a means of extorting, those, because now them will now be judge and jury of case, So that's, I mean, at the base level, that's how I see how they kind of metamorphose into, groups and armed groups. Let me not even go as far as say armed bandits or even gangs, or So I think that we need to sit down and really think about the kind of security architecture that will respond to the Nigeria of the 21st century, both rural and urban, because I don't see it anywhere. I don't think that we have a police force that's capable of jack. The military maybe to some extent, but a police force that can, serve purposes. I don't believe say they exist. I don't like you say. I don't even think that. So when you say whether it's Jimmy Disu today and whatever his name is, or it was Egbetokun of yesterday, when you listen to these guys, I don't see people who can think about, and I'm sure they exist too. I'm sure that there are policemen who actually can think about what Nigeria needs. I'm sure. So because
today, good day. Some individuals.
Yeah, because today when one idiot governor build command and control center, it becomes, talk of town. But command and control center where they command where they control with it. Do you understand? Maybe you put one camera for one traffic light, but is there any command and control center that is set up to survey, to mount surveillance in forests to start with? And if you build that command and control center, which light you won't use function? So I mean, for me, so many things where, in terms of just intelligence gathering, how to even increase. So it's, like I said, we're not, between government and, the politicians and, the police itself, really. And that's where most of my own, if it's a critique, that's where it's really focused at, is that these guys are not serious. Do you understand? And we are not also making demands of them. That's why a governor can walk into somewhere, and they go set canopy for victims of people where they just kidnap their children. Those ones self go kneel down, they beg them.
Yeah, you can imagine.
Say, I beg, make una. Can the guy make a connection between the security vote with that governor used by that LX 570 way you bulletproof come see you, or these days they don't all sorts of cars with bulletproof? Can't they make any connection between that and the insecurity that they are presently facing? Don't they know that if governor they're supposed to stone them? So for me, I think we've adopted a defeatist mentality, but not to stray too far from your question. And I don't see community policing, the way it's presently structured. I'm sure there's a place for community policing, don't get me wrong, but it has to be the police that assumes that role, that is, that is being paid to do the work. And so this whole, forest guards, I encounter a lot of I encounter a lot of forest guards, just even shortly between Enugu and Anambra. You can run into like 50 of them. Or okay, let me be conservative, like maybe 20 of them.
Yeah, but that's still a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Do you understand? And when I mean 20, I mean at checkpoints. I'm not even saying their numbers per.
No, that's interesting. That's quite interesting.
But the roads where those guys mount, those are the roads where people get kidnapped. And those people get by the time, because those ones, we don't mount forest guard from morning till night. By 6, 7, you don't come on that road. You don't go sleep. Any person who is unfortunate to ply that road on a fateful day can get kidnapped by 8, 9. So I mean, my brother, the architecture is broken, and the money that it's required to fix it is what politicians are tiffing. And until demands are beginning to or these things are beginning to frame in such a way that people understand this. So it's not just enough to come and cry on Twitter that it don't take now 2 weeks after Orire, Tinubu sent Nuhu Ribadu. Okay, Nuhu Ribadu. I'm now increasingly beginning to see that that guy has a thick skull. You be NSA, will be police officer before, will be spy. You don't even know the first thing about intelligence. And to be fair to some of our security services, some of them, like the DSS, picks up on this impending attacks. Do you understand? But you don't even have people who can respond to this thing in a way that they nip it in the bud. They can only react to it like 2 or 3 hours after, because maybe the person, the unit we're supposed to respond to her, they 4 local governments away, or even the next local government, but between that next local government and the community where this thing they happen, now 4 hours drive. So you begin to get this. So that's why I keep telling people, if I get conversation with you, they tell me, say, the Lagos model. Because Lagos, first of all, is 3,500 square kilometers. We have states that are 15, 20,000 square kilometers. Do you understand? How are you going to police those kinds of spaces? So, yeah, to an extent, community policing might work if we have policemen and women in the communities with the kind of gadgets and technology and resource that they need to prevent crime, not respond to crime. I mean, I think this idea that we're responding to crime is the one that is most, I think I know talk with I know the English word I don't understand. I think I don't leave out, there.
OEG, your parting shots.
I just feel like if
I guess let me throw in a second dimension for my own interest, which is that is there a model of policing we can recommend or pursue that also strengthens the left's capacity to undermine the regime? Or will we always be recommending with one breath the thing that we might come to reject later on?
I think again it's when things are what they are supposed to be, then you get what the intended results from them. Now look at I don't want to use Lagos model, but a situation or condition where the influence of these guys so much percolates into state architecture, paramilitary, but because this same Lagos, let's take Lagos neighborhood safety. This now political, like say that they give grants or that they help people, like now APC conduit, you go use enter that employment. So at the end of the day, you're already beholden as somebody employed in that community architecture security framework to the government of the day, be it they perform or they know perform, which we know say they know they perform. So that is going to undermine whatever action or anything where you do, because however they mismanage you dare not say anything or maybe try to form organic bond with the community and say, okay, yeah, this is what the government is not doing. Let's organize ourselves. And you're going to be sacked or just taken away, disappeared or something like that. So when you have the hands of the government or this ruling class so much in whatever initiative they want to come and create themselves, it don't already kill the program or what we want to achieve from the get-go. So we're not going to get anything. So this community policing, if it happens within the framework that is not independent of the ruling class, I'm not saying that, okay, maybe we just start to carry gun up and about, then they do these things without some sort of legal framework. But it has to be genuinely independent of the influence of these guys that are the ones that got us into this mess in the first place. Because if it's not, then it's going to just be there. They'll create it, but it won't serve any purpose that it's supposed to serve. And if you need some sort of creative tension between the ground and the government, you're not going to have it. Creative tension in the direction of say, okay, this is how we can make things better. Let's do this, let's do that, or even call out the leadership. They're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to ask for things that they need to make their work done. They're just going to be happy that they've been given that employment. Shut up and collect your salary. Sit down there and react whenever bandits come into your community. And hope that you're safe so that you're not the one they kill when they attack. That's what it's going to become. And I will probably even go out and say that is what it is. Even if in places where we have those sort of initiatives, that's what it is, So I feel like if it's not organic and if it's not what it's supposed to be genuinely from the ground itself, then we're going to be back to square one, and hoping to create something that is independent of the influence of these guys.
No, I don't think I can.
So,
yeah.
Before you jump in, because I would also like to hear your take, especially, this what the left can, kinds of participatory roles that the left can play in such a way that they can, maybe at the lower level, create, this kind of architecture that, can then be used to undermine, the state. But I think that it's important, maybe even more for our listeners, that, so when I say the Lagos model, it is simply that Lagos State went to court for some reason in the early 2000s. I think it was Tinubu who went to court. So this must have been 2004, 2005. And then, the APC people would even claim that the law that enabled the birth of Amoteco came off the back of this lawsuit that Tinubu won against the federal government, I think at the Supreme Court level. Now, this led to the formation of So one led to, I think, maybe formation or renaming of RRS, but also to, so I think the law allowed them to create RRS as a unit of the police force that could be controlled by the state. All right. And then subsequently, sometime around 2007, I think that was, they then, I don't think they needed a law or an act of, I don't think there was any need for that law to create what they call the LSTF. I think Lagos State Security Trust Fund. Something like that. Okay. And then subsequently, they now also created, so I think they also needed a law, at least the state law, to get the, wait, what did you call these guys?
LSNC. Lagos State Neighborhood
Lagos State Neighborhood, yeah. So that the Lagos State Neighborhood thing, it had to be some kind of intelligence gathering, whatever. Do you understand? But I can tell you for free that there are many locations that don't even know about the existence of this neighborhood anything, because they never see them for their neighborhood to start with. You know? So when we say, that model, I think it's important to stress the fact that, something that OAG mentions, that the people who they get into the employment of even the Lagos State Security Neighborhood, whatever, now people will be APC, apparatchiks. Now people will be APC supporters. You understand? So it's that already even defeats the purpose. Do you understand? So that's one. And what the trust fund is set up to do is that, because there are many headquarters of many of these big firms in Lagos, some of these guys then, contribute to a pot, and that pot is now used to support the acquisition of hillocks, pickups, buy guns, buy ammunition, buy all sorts of things, maybe even pay, because I think that the RSS unit gets maybe 20-30% more than the average Nigerian police, officer. Members of that unit will get more than maybe 20-30% more than what their peers in, normal police employee would get. So this is, and it's, if you ask me, a model that was even set up to siphon fund, because it follows the same contract giving, system where we say they will give contract to who will supply the hillocks, who will supply ammunition, who will supply. So I think that's, especially for our listeners, it's important that, we kind of paint a picture of what this model actually looks like, so that if we're saying that we're looking for some sort of alternative that is, led by the left, what might we be looking for, in terms of, even if it's at that intelligence gathering level, in ways that can be useful to the left, let's say we would say, okay, if we get this kind of Orire situation now, or some of the situations that we've had in just over the course of the last few months, but even more over the course of the last few years, how we can have these kinds of setups that, if these things repeat themselves, over a period of time, can even enable us unseat a sitting governor. At least make you feel the heat. Maybe not unseat a sitting governor, but make you feel the heat more than all this nonsense photo op that they want to do these days. When we have, because I don't know if I think I'm asking a question at the end of it, but I'm trying to see if you can then fit your own response or your own parting shot into this, should I say, line of inquiry. My head is a bit fuzzy, so might not be operating at my brain.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting set of provocations. Like, because it's especially the element that brings in civic responses, right? Like how to get people kind of mobilized to put pressure. My challenge again is just that, like, I'm just fundamentally skeptical about the capacity of the people in government, governors, and definitely federal, to deliver. I don't think they have the awareness, and I don't think they have the interest. But even if the interest was there, I'm just not convinced they have the awareness. And the truth is that, you've alluded to this too, Mega, is that it's not a political risk for them either. Okay, just the way their vote share is organized, the way their connection with INEC is organized, they can continue winning elections and staying in office while the distant rural areas continue to be under siege. So there's a real structural distance between them and the people who are really facing the brunt of it. So, I mean, I guess with the direction OG was traveling is what seems most appealing to me. And I think that, there aren't too many examples in Nigerian history where the left took that dual power situation seriously in respect to the question of security and insecurity. I mean, the only partial example we have is the special expedition, right, or the extraordinary expedition of the Madunagu Arebede Jaifo group. You know, that was late 70s, right, Emeka?
Yeah, that's good too.
Right, where they wanted to do like armed struggle in the countryside, somewhere in the southwest, or
Mm.
Demo. So, but yeah, for various reasons that have yet to be fully explicated, that didn't last very long or go very far. But from elsewhere, we can come up with examples like, of course, Zapatistas are some of the most iconic examples of the left actually providing security directly, in the contemporary period. And some listeners will be aware of the Zapatistas in Chiapas region in Mexico, who basically are pursuing a model of left-oriented self-government, community assemblies, their own education and healthcare, their own kind of cooperative economics, and crucially, their own security. And in that context, like these things are not separated; they are not distinguished. Like the people who are called soldiers are also the people who are working in the farms and who are teaching in the schools. So that they don't then become a divorced militia that becomes
Entity.
exactly that starts to prey, and the gun and the and the hoe or the agricultural tool become separate hierarchical structures. But so there are models like that. But in a way that's emerges from a different kind of left, right? The left that wants to be engaged in getting its hands dirty in a literal sense, and which means farming, which means production, which also means like voluntary armed, like security provisioning, armed or not armed. Um, yes, we've had some other examples here of like in a more localized context. So, Omole Ibukun actually wrote this article for Africa as a Country a while ago, Securing Nigeria, where he was talking about the example of the left in the University of Ife, which we also, of course, explored briefly in our conversation with Joan about the history of the left in Ife and how, student activists formed a kind of security committee that was also sort of in charge of welfare. And they managed to beat back some of the cultism, mobilizing students to volunteer and this sort of thing. Of course, like generalizing from that campus outside and especially into a rural area is very tricky, perilous even exercise. But there are these examples. So it strikes me that, yeah, I mean, this is an arena that we probably should be exploring as well. When you have an elite that is fundamentally disinterested and structurally divorced from the realities of most of the population, then I think continuing to make demands, quote unquote, of those people, let's just say that has its limits. So, yeah, I mean, I must say that the whole idea of dual power and what that might mean for security provision has increasingly become much more interesting to me. You know, as the security situation has worsened in various parts of the country. I'm aware though that that's not an immediate resolution, right? It's more of a medium to long term question. So in the interim, I suppose I'm going to join the rest of the well-meaning population in saying, bring back our students, making demands. But yeah, while that's happening, I think we should still keep an eye on longer-term horizons, right?
Yeah, very important. Else we'll be back to where we started from.
I agree. Well, folks,
But
I don't know that.
bring back our girls. I mean, if you round up, but I'm not sure I say bring back our girls. I mean, you know, if you talk, say that movement no follow Topu Jonathan. So, yeah.
Yeah. No. It played a role for sure. And then brought us Buhari. But anyway, yeah, it did something. It did something. Yeah.